So what's up, everybody? Welcome to Who's Your Rabbi? My name is Jaime, and today we're going to continue with our light series. This is part 4 of the light series. And as you may remember, if you've been following the series, then we're working off of Matthew chapter 5, verses 5:14 through 16. And so, we left off with verse 14, and we broke it down into part A and part B. So we're now going to continue with um, verse 15. But before we go actually any further, I just wanted to give a shout out to a friend of mine who's having a birthday tomorrow, and I just want to wish a happy birthday. And so, with that being said, let's keep going with our series. And so, the basis for the actual lesson is obviously, like I mentioned before, Matthew 5, verse 15. This is part of the Sermon on the Mount. And so, we're kind of going through the Sermon on the Mount, breaking it down little by little. And so, let's go straight into the actual scripture, and then we'll go from there. So, verse 15 says, "Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a basket. Instead, they put it in a lampstand so they give light to all the house." So that's the verse. We're gonna kind of break it down, study it little by little. And if you've been listening to the previous stuff, then you understand that if the backdrop to this sermon is Jerusalem, and in particular the Mount Zion, the Temple Hill, where the temple's at in the first century, then you kind of understand what he's talking about. So, if the temple is the house, then inside of the house there's furniture and accessories and all kinds of stuff, right? So one of the things that was inside the temple was the menorah. And so kind of gonna go through some of the stats as far as the mention of the menorah in the scriptures. So once again, we're reading off of the TLV, and we're using Bible Gateway U version and a couple other tools to get information and just kind of get stats. But the actual numbering was from Bible Gateway. So according to Bible Gateway, it says that in total in the Tanakh there is a total of 31 mentions. I'm sorry, 28 mentions in the Tanakh. So in Exodus 17 times, Leviticus 1 time, and in Numbers 5 times. So in the Torah, a total of 23 times out of those 28. And then we go into the Nevi'im, or the prophets, 1 time in First Kings, and 2 times in Zechariah. So in the Nevi'im, a total of 3 times. So we're looking at 26 right there. And then First and Second Chronicles each with 1. So, and that's the Ketuvim. So, we have 26, 27, 28 times right there that it is mentioned in the Tanakh. And we're talking about the menorah itself. And so in the Brit Hadashah, or the New Testament, there's a total of 3 times, and it's in Hebrews 1 time, and in Revelation or Apocalypse 2 times, right? And so the first mention of the menorah is in Parshat teruma, and it's in Exodus 25:31, and it reads, saying, "You are to make a menorah of pure gold by hammered work. It is its base, stems, cups, bulbs, and flowers are to be one piece." Um, and then we have other mentions in there. So Exodus 25:32, Exodus 25, 33, 34, 35, and then in Exodus 26:35. And all of these are mentioning kind of like the design of the menorah and kind of the positioning and everything like that. So um, interesting thing is in verse 25, chapter 25, verse 35, it says that, you know, there are six branches coming out of the menorah. So another interesting thing is that it mentions the menorah itself, but it also mentions the lamps, and it kind of makes a distinction. So, you know, we'll eventually kind of look into that, but for now, we're just gonna focus on the mention of the actual menorah itself, right? And so the next time around is Exodus 30:27, Exodus 31:8, Exodus 35:14, and then in Exodus 37:1, Exodus 37:17, Exodus 37:19, Exodus 37:20, Exodus 39:37, Exodus 44, Exodus 40:24, and then Leviticus 24:4. Let's read that one. It says, "He is to keep the lamp in order uh, on the pure gold menorah before Adonai continually." So this is kind of talking about what the purpose of the Levites and the priesthood is supposed to be doing, and how they're supposed to um, keep the lamp lit at all times. And so um, it is a continual uh, flame that's supposed to keep going. Next, we have Numbers 3:31, Numbers 4:9, Numbers 8:2, Numbers 8:3, Numbers 8:4, and that pretty much puts it into the Torah. These are where the mentions of um, the actual word menorah in itself, but also some distinctions with light and or the lamps. Um, so, like I said, we'll kind of, you know, get into that a little bit later, uh, so that we can you know, get more in depth into that. But then we go into First Kings, and it says in chapter 7, verse 49, the menorahs, plural, five on the right side and five on the left, in front of the inner sanctuary of pure gold, the flowers, the lamps, and the tongues of gold. So remember, First, Second Kings um, gives you a history of the kings of Israel from Shaul and David all the way to the exile. And so by this time, there is a temple. Um, and so you know, some traditions have kind of started to kick in. We're talking about, you know, at the very least, you know, 400, 500-year period in between the time of Moses and the giving of the Torah and everything that happened in the Torah, and then going into the uh, period of the kings, starting with the prophet Samuel, who's the first prophet after Moses, and then it starts a lineage of prophetic, you know, work basically. So we notice that here it says that there's multiple menorahs, five on the right, five on the left, and it's in the inner sanctuary or the inner sanctum, or what is known as the holy place, right? So this is the place in the middle of the three divisions. So there's the outer court or the outer part of the tabernacle, and in the temple it's the outer court, and then you go into the sanctuary, um, and then there's the actual holy of holies, where you would have the Ark of the Covenant in the first temple, and you know, um, I'm sorry, during the tabernacle, and then during the time of the first temple. So that's kind of how it's broken down. But we see that the tabernacle and or the temple are dwelling places for God. Right? It's the place where He puts His name, the place where He shows His presence, and so it has meaning. So that's why there's, just like we have, furniture in our, living places, whether you're in an apartment, a house, a room, whatever it is, a studio, whatever it is, wherever it is that you make your dwelling, you have certain things that you uh, need, but um, they're also in a way kind of just give the place a little bit of a look, right? And some people like to actually get fancy and get matching furniture and all this kind of stuff. That's good. But right here, we just want to look at the fact that God is actually um, dwelling in this place, right? His presence is there, especially during the tabernacle and in the first temple period. The tradition says that in the second temple period, he his presence wasn't always there, and even though the second temple was a magnificent building, especially uh, during the Herodian period, because Herod actually um, expands on the temple and makes it uh, much more attractive than the original. Because if we actually read Ezra and Nehemiah, then you know a lot of the people were actually disappointed once they actually had finished the construction of the second temple, because it didn't match up to Solomon's temple. And so some people still were able to um, see the first temple, and then you know come out of there and return from exile, and then see the construction of and the finalization of the second temple. And so you know that was part of the deal. But um, the next time we hear something about the menorah is in the Nevi'im, right? And so we have the prophet Sahariah or Zechariah, and in chapter 4, verse 2, it says, "He asked me, 'What do you see?' I replied, 'Behold, I see a solid gold menorah with its bowls at the top of it, and its seven lamps on it, with its seven pipes for the lamps that are on the top of it.'" So, a couple verses later in verse 11, it says, "Then I responded by asking him, 'What are these two olive trees on the right and on the left of the menorah?'" So now we see another allusion to the meaning of the um, the menorah, the lampstand, and we're gonna go into that a little further down. But then you have in First Chronicles, and then in Second Chronicles, mention of the menorah, and then in Hebrews 9, uh, verse 2, For a tent was prepared in the outer part with the menorah, the table, and the presentation of the bread. This is called the holy place. So it's kind of giving an explanation of what happened, or of the structure of the tabernacle in context with what the writer of Hebrews is trying to teach about Jesus and his priesthood, and everything that goes along with that. So that's another mention of it, right? And then in the book of Revelation, we have a couple other mentions. Chapter 1, verse 20. As for the mystery of the seven stars that you saw in my right hand, and the seven gold menorot, that is the seven lampstands, the seven stars are the angels of Messiah's seven communities, and the seven menorahs are the seven communities. So right here we see symbology, but it's using common known things to make the comparisons. Because remember that we're talking about a first century early Jesus movement. It is still primarily a Jewish movement. Remember, all the way to the beginning of the fourth century in 325, that's when the actual official separation took place. Anytime before that, it's still a Jewish movement. It's still part of that. By that point, um, Gentiles had kind of overtaken it, so there was variations of the practice, but nevertheless, it was still part of Judaism. And so, if you look at it from that perspective, and you look at uh, Jewish writings and Jewish historical, works, and the rabbinical works and all that stuff, you'll see that there's a connection, and or sometimes even direct references that you can um, use to kind of piece the puzzle together, and then have the history actually make more sense. When you hear traditional Christian teaching about the church, then you have a lot of things that are not necessarily correct, because they're trying to give you a justification for their history with a theological twist, you could say. But things just, that's where all the questions arise, and things just don't add up when you do it that way. If you start Christianity's history at 325 going forward, then you have, you know, a pretty good streamline. You can, anything that, you can find on it is pretty much verifiable to an extent, and you can actually make sense of why, the followers, or the ecclesia, that the church, um, looks, the way it looks today. You'll start seeing the differences, and all the dogmas that start to kick in, and all this other stuff. And like I said, some of it just doesn't reflect what the actual scriptures in the books, um, say, when it comes to New Testament, and studying the New Testament that way. So, um, you know, so we have the menorah. It's actually one of the oldest Jewish symbols. Um, it's actually older than the Star of David, um, and like I said, there's a connection with the trees, and or in particular the olive tree, or the olive branches. And so when you see, menorahs today, um, you see them having some kind of a shape of a tree, or having the branches, and everything that was required by God Himself when He designed it, and gave Moses the design. So this leads us to, you know, what it actually is trying to give you, or what it actually is trying to reflect. Um, and it's in Exodus chapter 3, verse 1. We're going back. So we're backtracking when we're studying uh, the Bible, and in particular, if you're studying something out of the New Testament and you want to give it backing, then you have to backtrack it, basically. So you go from, whether it's the Gospels, or if it's one of the epistles, go to the Gospel, and then from the Gospel to the Ketuvim, and then from the Ketuvim to the Nevi'im, and from the Nevi'im to the Torah. It should all connect. You know what I mean? Because the Torah is the source. The Torah is the core of the teaching. So if anything can't be directly connected to it, then that's when you have to ask, questions, and kind of investigate a little bit further. Like, how did they come up with this? Because it's not, in any way, shape, or form uh, looking like it's coming from God Himself, right? From the Torah through Moses. And so, even Mashiach, Jesus, Yeshua, um, when He heals somebody, what does He tell him to do? He tells them, to do what Moses, says. Um, Several occasions of that, where He heals somebody, and then He tells them, hey, don't tell anybody, just go do what Moses tells you to do. Why? Because Jesus is keeping the Torah, and He's not making somebody else go astray. He's telling them to go back to the Torah. That's what one of the purposes of the Mashiach is, remember, to be a prophet like Moses. And so we see that Jesus, um, takes uh, a part in that. And so we go back, and it says, excuse me, uh, verse, uh, chapter 3, verse 1. Uh, and the heading in the TOV, it says, Angel of Adonai in a burning bush. Right? So it says, Now Moses was tending the flock of his father in law Jethro, the priest of Midian. So he led the flock to the farthest end of the wilderness, coming into the mountain of God, Horeb. Verse 2. Then the angel of Adonai appeared to him in a flame of fire from within a bush. So he looked and saw the bush burning with a fire, yet it was not consumed. So we go back to the visual aspect, right? Moses saw a burning, or a bush that was on fire, but it wasn't burning or being consumed by the fire. In the same fashion, when you are in the temple, and you look at the structure of the temple, the way it was arranged, the menorah would have been to the south of the southern wall, basically, facing the table of showbread. But there's a panel that was there of gold that reflected the light, right? So if you're on the outskirts, if you're outside of the temple, on the outskirts of the city, then what you'll see is that the light of the menorah, flashes out. So let's say Jesus is teaching, his Sermon on the Mount. The backdrop is Jerusalem, and so people would have been able to see this. So it makes more sense now what he's saying. When he says that, um, you know, people don't put a lampstand under a basket. Instead, they put the lampstand so it gives light to all the house. Right. So he, Jesus is preaching. He's giving him a visual, right? But it's a visual that they can understand. Um, and the when you see the reflection of, or the shadow that is cast by this, you know, image, right? When you have the menorah, you have the flames on the lamps that are burning constantly, but on the opposite side, you have that the shadow that you can see. It looks like it's a tree that is you know, coming up with light or flames, right? But it's not being consumed. The tree still remains. The branches are still there. Uh, the fire is just, you know, on the level or on the top. For the most part, there's different designs, but we're talking about the temple menorah, right? So that's the visual that you would have gotten. I'm sorry. So you know that's basically what Jesus is talking about when he's giving this speech. Um, you know, and so he's giving them something that is um, understandable, that they can process. And he's using his surroundings. He's using wording and things that they know are familiar to them. That speak to them. Um, and so there's a couple other times in the Gospels where this is mentioned. And so Mark 12, verse 26, I'm sorry, makes a reference to this passage of Exodus. And then Luke also makes a reference to it. Um, and so Mark, Luke are part of the Synoptic Gospels. So there's a lot of shared material between uh, Mark, Matthew, and Luke, uh, which is in the order that they were written. The canon book, the canon order is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and then John at the end. But you kind of understand what I'm saying. And then the next time around, uh, there's another reference in Acts 7 30, and it says, "When the 40 years had passed, an angel appeared to him in the wilderness on Mount Sinai in the flame of a burning bush." So it's just kind of recapping some of the stuff. If I remember correctly, Acts 7 is where Stephen is giving his summary of the Torah, before he gets stoned to death. So that's kind of what's going on there. So we're going to continue with the next verse, and just kind of keep analyzing, breaking it down, and just kind of giving you an idea of what um, Jesus was talking about when he gave this. Um, we call it a sermon, but he's just expounding on teachings from the Torah. Um, and so, with that being said, uh, I just hope you like what we're doing. I hope that you are gaining something from this. Um, that it is, you know, to play on words, enlightening you to follow, you know, God, and to follow the path. Um, and so, just subscribe to the channel. Who's Your Rabbi is your main teaching tool there. We're working on other stuff like I've mentioned previously, and we're just gonna keep going at it. Things try to get in the way. Things try to defer us from doing these things, but we just have to persevere and keep pushing. Um, I'm just a regular human being. I have faults. I have you know uh, things to take care of, necessities and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, um, it comes down to just us wanting to make time or not, and to you know dedicate a little time to God. If we can dedicate time to stuff that is not important, or maybe it is important, but it's not um, something that is you know related to God directly, then um, we can kind of lose our focus and go in different directions. But nevertheless, it's just about getting back, right? Making shuva, returning, make repenting, going to that, straight path. Um, and the Greek definition of repentance, metanoia, to go beyond your gnosis, your no, to change your mind, basically. Um, so I just wanted to put that out there. Hope you like it, and we're gonna continue to do more work on this. And so, you know, until next time, Psalm 122 verse 6 says, "Shalom, shalom, Yerushalayim." Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Shalom and Ahava.